Hey, Matrix Live. It is the 21st of February 2000. No, 2000? 2020. We're definitely still in 2020. So I'm Ben. I'm here with Nathan, who you might have
Hello.
noticed is called KB1RD when he's on the Matrix. So why don't you say hi?
Hello. I'm Nathan Penny. I go by my ham radio call sign KB1RD, one of my matrix. And recently I've been working on my kind of pet project, which is matrix-notepad. And that's just, if you haven't seen it, it's just a collaborative text editor, kind of similar to something like Etherpad, but without rich text yet. So, and I've been working on making the newer version work. And it's almost done. I'm planning to push a version later today. So.
Oh, really? So I used it. I've been using it for a little while,
Yeah.
mostly in a testing context. And I didn't use it since last week, but I guess you've been working on it quite a lot then.
I've been pretty busy. Like the entire month of February, I've just been doing schoolwork. I've closed the tabs completely. I couldn't focus on it. But I've been working on a new algorithm, so I completely rewrote most of everything.
So new algorithm, because it's using what do you call it? Logut, is it?
Yeah, it's based on Logut. There's a bunch of technical papers written on it. And I just made some of my own modifications. I did that mostly because in Logut, if you have two people that type without knowledge of each other's edits, there's a case where it'll kind of get interleaved and it won't really look good. So a lot of my modifications are trying to resolve those issues and make it more user-friendly.
So that's interesting. Is that not part of the original definition of the algorithm? Is to try and deal with that? Isn't that almost part of its purpose?
Well, yeah, but it deals with it in ways that may not be user-friendly. So
okay. So one of the things I noticed reading it, and I don't, maybe you can just like summarize this, why this isn't a problem. If each letter is treated atomically, so the way Logut works, as I understand it, is each character is essentially individually addressed, and then any changes are expressed in the form of the location of that character. Is that not super expensive? Like algorithmically to compute and transport and everything? Like what's the plan there?
Transport is, I don't think it's particularly bad. It's just basically you're storing an array of integers, and it stores the text along with it. So part of what my algorithm did, and that's why it's like 800 lines, something like that,
right.
Is it took the text itself and treated that as like a list of atoms. So you're not listing out the positions for every single atom in the event.
Okay.
You list like the start position, then it infers the rest of the positions.
Right. Okay. Okay.
And in terms of the algorithm being expensive, yeah, it is.
Okay.
Yeah, my current versions are quite inefficient, but I'm working on making them a bit more efficient. Like for example, if you have a list of consecutive atoms, you can squash those together into the same nodes. They're stored in the same block of memory. Start position stored once. The text is stored. Actually, when I implement the algorithm, the text is stored separate from the positions. So it has a map of positions, a binary search tree, which I haven't balanced yet. Again, that's something I need to do.
But for the, I mean, in terms of the matrix implementation, the events themselves, the start and end position, or rather the start and length of the block and the string are stored in the same event, right? They're transmitted together.
Oh yeah, they're combined afterwards. And I'm hoping at some point, you could have the data stored separately in like a separate, maybe in an iframe somewhere else. Like if you're running somebody else's application, I'm going to get to this later. The data can be stored inside the application. Then you have like a web worker that just takes the positions and does all the heavy lifting and sends them back down.
Okay, interesting. I mean, so one thing you wouldn't want to lose though is you'd still want to store everything together because by looking at the history in the matrix room, you should be able to get like the complete edit history of the whole document, right? Shouldn't it? Shouldn't the room contain everything? Have I got that right?
Oh, the room does. It's just the algorithm is responsible for not really storing things, but just sort of storing the mapping between the positions that are stored in the room and what the user is seeing on the screen.
Okay. Okay.
So
display level. Okay. Okay. I think I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
I think I have. I doubt this is going to load up here.
Yeah, we had some
I made a
connections
couple
earlier before we started the call. So let's see what.
Yeah, that's why I'm like looking over here because that's where my
basically. If this
computer
doesn't
is.
work, then no worries. What we'll do is we'll link everything in the comments.
Okay. Yeah, I have a couple draw.io things, and they're just not really opening.
Don't worry. We'll link it from the comments. Then the thing is, this is going to go out as audio as well. All right, cool. Why don't we rewind a little bit? Why? How did you get involved in Matrix, and why did you decide to do this project using these tools?
That's interesting. So I was actually looking at microprocessors. I was looking at the NXP's IMX8 microprocessor, and I sort of found the Librem phone. Right. So I kind of went the reverse way here.
Yeah. You came in from
and they mentioned Matrix, and I'm like, oh, I wonder what this is. And I looked at it, and I was like, bookmarked it. I'm like, all right, I'll look at it later. And then I kind of was thinking, well, it would be nice if there was a self-hosted Google Docs. I looked in Matrix. It's like, oh, so they say it's a distributed event database. That could be useful. So I got my own account at matrix.org, and eventually I set up my own home server. Cool. And I figured, in terms of using Matrix versus just implementing my own system, I figured by the time I've like implemented user joining, like guest access, all the stuff that Matrix just does by default, I will have just re-implemented most of the stuff that's in Matrix, and I'll have a distributed event store anyway, because that's how edits work.
Yeah. I mean, this is the beauty of open source and open protocols, is to be able to build on top of it. And the underlying layers you don't need to even necessarily care about, let alone implement for yourself. I mean, it's better to understand. Cool. Okay, so let's rewind. So there's two parts to your project. There's Lugut-ish, which is your name for your implementation of the algorithm, and then there's matrix-notepad, which is a really quite glossy, actually, client level application which combines matrix rooms with this algorithm to produce a collaborative text editor, and it works. It works great. But you think the next stage is going to be to implement that as a widget, or maybe have somebody else do that and collaborate with them?
Yeah. So what I have right now is kind of like a test for the algorithm, really. I mean, yeah, I could do unit tests, but it's good to have like a working demo so you can type in it and see, does this really work? And I also wanted to take a look at the performance and that kind of thing. What I found from the performance is that Matrix is actually quite fast for real-time stuff. Really the thing that people complain about is the initial sync. So that's what I found, is I need to just figure out, and that's pretty difficult if you're syncing back to get all of the edits. I need to make that as fast as possible.
Yeah, okay.
And in terms of the widget thing, so there was talk about making some kind of like a client that would load up people's applications into an iframe. Because when I was originally writing this, I was like almost kind of concerned that, what happens if like this breaks somebody's account? Like, what do I do if it spams events into like matrix.org? And it'd be great to have some kind of a standard way of loading up a user's app without necessarily trusting whoever wrote that app.
Interesting. So how would you expect to see that implemented? What would that look like?
I mean, my initial thoughts were something like you have kind of like a file-like interface. Like right now, it just displays a list of rooms. But you could have like directories, subdirectories, that kind of thing.
Okay.
And when you click on it, you would associate that, a particular file type like stored in the rooms, with that particular application. So when you open it, it would give that application access to only that room.
Okay.
But I mean, there's no reason to limit it there. I mean, you could have, for example, if I wanted a smart thermostat that connects to my Matrix account, you know, why not have like a widget on my homepage that can only access the thermostat room? And it just loads up and does all it's supposed to do is display my home temperature.
Yeah. I mean, so some of this is already solved because there's power levels and access, pretty robust access control. But the other thing, I guess, in terms of directories, is I wonder if communities and the upcoming community work would benefit you, because essentially it's rooms of rooms, it's lists of rooms in a potentially hierarchical setup.
That's precisely what my thought was, is to use that.
Yeah, and I mean, again, minimum on your side, right? Like you want to not change the protocol or do as much, you know, do any lower level stuff if you can help it. Yeah, cool. Oh, so the other thing I was thinking, comments about initial syncing and the need to like take massive history. Is there a solution here where you could basically have like a checkpoint, like some event which is like a snapshot or something?
Yeah. I was looking into stuff like that. Generally, I like the idea of having, for unencrypted rooms, I like the idea of having a custom synchrotron kind of thing that would help with the algorithm, and just have like its own implementation, because this is really what it is it's just a different form of state events, really. That would be more.
Okay, so it would be a state event thing. Okay, that's interesting.
They're not, I mean, obviously they're not technically state events, but they're treated similar. Like you have a lot of the same issues you encounter, like how do you implement them into encrypted rooms? And for those, my thought would be like take a squash of your map of it. So like what positions in text map to which positions in the algorithm, and then like your plain text version, and you just store those on encrypted, obviously on the media repo, and possibly like link to it in an event, because it'd be kind of bulky to store in
okay, all right, cool. Yeah, so it would essentially be snapshots but linked from periodic events but stored in the media repo.
I know one of the Matrix developers actually sent me a in the Matrix collaboration room, actually sent me a paper that was on encrypted or verified snapshots. You could verify based on I really forget what it was doing, but it was verifying events that other users had signed, so you could verify that yes, this is actually what it's supposed to look like. And I haven't actually read it, but in theory it should be possible.
So E2E seems to present a lot of problems in itself. I mean, in all worlds, but particularly for you, because it's going to affect how you can do things like snapshots. It's also going to increase the overhead of the, you know, you delete a letter from an item, and it's, you know, you need a whole new request. How can you speak on that front? Like, how is E2E a particular problem?
Well, it is one of the, I'm almost being more of a problem to E2E than it is a problem for me. Because for example, like I'm eventually working on some kind of JSON data store thing based on this. So the current algorithm that I have would be great for lists and stuff, but I'd also have like maps and, you know, whatever else. But each of those, what I'm thinking is you store them in like label-based threads. So that would be using the proposal that's already merged. And I'm working on stuff that would lead up to an experiment like that. But part of the problem with that is it's leaking where you're editing in the document. Like if you have a list of, say, flashcards in a study set, I don't know why you'd need to encrypt a study set, but maybe you do. It's revealing where, you know, what you're editing. I'm planning to encrypt what the data actually is and what kind of a model it is, but they know roughly how many objects are turned into a data type. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really see, other than encrypting the metadata itself, I don't really see a solution to this. But this is sounding really good. I wanted to go a little bit like less technical. Why start the project at all? I know that there's always like, you know, if you build it, they will come and this kind of stuff. But this is quite an ambitious project, and there's people already doing it, right? EtherCalc are doing it, Google are doing it. So what made you want to like do it at all, I guess is the...
Well, in terms of like a centralized and non-encrypted solution. I mean, there's like there's obvious privacy issues. And then with Google, so people have complained about stuff they upload being subject to their terms and conditions, which allow them to redistribute it quite a bit. And like, for example, if you want to send documents and share documents between, say, a doctor and their patient, or like a lawyer and their customer, those have to be confidential. And those are kind of overlooked by a lot of these centralized solutions that are not encrypted. The other thing is, I don't think people should be dependent on a single company to do all of their sharing for anything. Like, I should just be able to switch and move all of my stuff over, just as I would Matrix if I don't like what Google's doing. Kind of locks them in. I mean, yeah, that's companies, but still, it'd be great to have a solution. And the other thing is that Google hasn't been very flexible about certain things. Like, for example, they allow equations in just their normal documents, but I've tried to put them in presentations. It just can't do it. They have no way of doing that. So like, I had a presentation where I ended up doing it with another person, just sitting there on my computer doing it in LibreOffice because they supported embedding equations. Everyone else typed it out with like parentheses, and I'm like, I cannot read that.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can think is like image exports, but yeah, I mean, much better to have it native, right?
I did image exports for another presentation that also looked bad. But like, if it's run by a community, for example, people can always say fork it and just change it, make the changes they want, and maybe it'll get merged back into the master. Maybe it'll be like a new protocol. And then the other thing is if you want to build something on top of Google Docs that has real-time collaboration, you have to play by their rules. You have to create an app that they kind of vet and let in. And that's really kind of time consuming, and developers, may not want to do that. They may want to just deploy their app with no prior coordination. The other thing is when you do that, you're reliant on servers somewhere to run your service. And that isn't necessarily practical. Like, if I write a small collaborative application is for, say, like a Quizlet clone, I keep on using this as an example, I may not necessarily want to run my own service. I may just want to put my application on GitHub and have people use it. And running a service kind of restricts people in that way. So if you want to make it universal, I feel like you need to make it kind of something like built in. Like, people develop applications on a computer, rely on a file system. They know that's going to be there, and they know there's a standard API they can use. I don't see why it shouldn't be the same for collaborative documents.
The market is warped in Google's favor because it's very difficult to make this kind of software. It's particularly difficult to make a good UI. And then, linking it into an existing ecosystem obviously gives them a huge boost. I think, I think you're quite right. People do have a right to be able to do what they want and to be able to control their own software, including not hosting it if they don't want to, and just making it available. So yeah, this makes a lot of sense. When you were talking just then, I didn't put this in the notes, but when you were talking just then, it occurred to me that a mashup between matrix-notepad and Matrix Presents, I don't know if you've seen this
Yes.
is like, that would be amazing. And it actually wouldn't even be that sci-fi, because you're kind of working at two different ends of the stack anyway. Matrix Presents is very much a viewer, whereas Matrix Notepad is an editor plus munging algorithm. So there's a lot of potential for that. I'd love to see something there.
I actually thought Presents was pretty cool. I mean, of course, but I thought the idea of like being able to react in real time to presentations is actually pretty interesting. I never thought of the whole real time portion of it. I mean, real time editing, but I never thought of like in a presentation you could have real time communication between presenters.
I mean, and I think it breaks down the difference between editing, real-time collaboration and editing while you're preparing the presentation, and also when you're presenting it. Because in our community, there's a pretty slim difference a lot of the time. We're preparing stuff pretty much in the open. Everything we do is either open source or at least highly as documented as we can reasonably do it. Presentations are performed live, but then they're also made available after the fact. So we really are starting to break down the whole concept of edit, prepare, present, and then that's the end of the thing. Everything's getting really spread out and really made more available. Anyway, that was just
ironically, I feel like
yeah,
like making the whole thing kind of integrated be something Google would be doing, but
well, I mean,
I
it's
feel like
the whole thing, right? It's decentralization and power to the people. All right, let's think about what's your, we talked about it a little bit, but what are your plans for the future? We talked about the widget idea, but I don't know if you want to expand on that a little bit.
I mean, I think it would be good to have some kind of like matrix apps client so you can load up custom applications and whatnot. I mean, matrix-notepad's kind of been a lot of my project. I mean, if people are interested, we could always collaborate, do something. I know I could see Halfshot using it, for example, in presents. I'm not like trying to like assign people to do work, but
no. I mean,
I just think
collaborate,
cool.
man. This is what it is.
Yeah, it's the name of the game. In the future, I mean, right now I'm working on getting conflicts working, and that is pretty difficult because what you have, and I have a diagram here to kind of show this. You have like in the Lagoot position space, you have multiple users editing on the same positions. So they're kind of like stacked in parallel. The whole point of the conflict resolution algorithm is to squash them out into like a single linear line, like you can see here. Okay. So that's what the top part here says. LNG, that stands for Lagoot node group. That's just grouping of any nodes that happen to have the same positions and the same users editing on them. So they all have the same start position and length. That's right. It. Okay. And then the CG, that's conflict group. And those are things that are all grouped sequentially in order of branch. In this case, branches are per user. And I also do plan to add custom branches as well. But you can see here, it goes in order of like first user A's branch, then user B's branch, then user C's branch. Right. And then your next conflict group kind of repeats the same thing. The whole point of that is you can see side by side what like 3 different users want that region to be. Yeah. Because they're stacked. If you think of it visually, they're stacked on the same area of the x-axis, and they're like on top of each other.
Okay, so how, I mean, it's just in the simplest terms then, how do you choose which of them gets what they want? Is that an unsolved problem?
That's left up to the client, and that's up to the user to decide. I don't want to get too much into the technicalities of it, but you shouldn't have clients that like automatically respond to it, because you can get a situation where clients kind of bounce back and forth.
So I've noticed that the Google Docs, going back to that, is deliberately quite aggressive, right? If you're editing a bullet point, for example, it just locks out that bullet point. And it makes it, I guess that they don't have stacking on top of each other so much, because once it's acknowledged to be locked, then, but that would require you to do a lot more work on the receiving client side.
It is more work, but it's not that much more work. I rewrote the algorithm to make this happen, which was kind of a pain. I started like December break and I'm not finished. Right. So the one that I'm building into the notepad now implements the new algorithm enough so that the existing stuff works, because there have been a bunch of bugs with it. My original code was mediocre at best. But it's not that much more work than just the original Lagootish algorithm was in the first place. So
okay, sounds reasonable. Cool. So you mentioned the winter break or December something. What are you a college student right now? You're in the US?
High school.
Oh, high school. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, this is mad progress then, isn't it?
Yeah, junior year too. So it's like, oh my God. This is my break now, so that's the only reason I'm able to do this.
All right, okay. Is it, I mean, I guess it's pretty wet and cold on the West Coast. On the East Coast. Is that why you're cooped up indoors?
Well, I'm actually skiing too, so
Okay.
in like when this is over, I'll go out and go skiing for.
All right. Cool. What else we got? Is that everything? So we were talking about deeper support on the Vue application, or is there?
Yeah, that is matrix-notepad itself is kind of like the code's kind of a mess. I don't really care that much though because it's kind of a test. I'm just kind of moving everything around. Like I don't super love JavaScript right now, but I'm writing everything in it just because it's super fast and it's easy for me to change stuff, break stuff, like whatever. And that just gives me a kind of realm to test everything in. And I think the next, once I finished the conflicts, I have to speed up the algorithm quite a bit. I'll just do some flame graphs and stuff, figure out where it's really spending most of its time. I know that right now it's iterating through several large arrays, and I plan to fix that. It's just kind of like, I want to get a proof of concept working before I try to tweak it.
Premature optimization is a massive risk on this project. So.
Yeah. I also want to procrastinate on that because I feel like there are more interesting things to be doing. Like particularly, I think I'm actually pretty close to a JSON kind of data type here. So instead of having just everything in the main room, I have several different labels, as I mentioned before, each with different data types. So I'm thinking right now I have plain text support. I'm thinking pretty soon I'll start working on rich text, which would just basically, what I'm thinking for rich text is you just treat a JSON object as another atom and just stick it right in with everything else. As for highlights, stuff like that, like bold, italic, I'm working on that. I still don't have a plan for that.
So they talk about matrix level support for that kind of thing. So like rather than using Markdown plus formatted HTML to have a JSON centric rich markup format. So yeah, looking into that would probably be a good idea.
And I actually have a plan for how to represent it. And I was actually thinking of talking to some of the Riot developers about this. I do have a format for just encoding it in JSON, not as a conflict-free replicated data type like a collaboration software would need, but just for representing it in standard matrix message events. And that could always be used. But I'm thinking for my first proof of concept of that kind of thing, I'm probably going to start with simple things like mentions, where I can just embed it right in line. I think actually mentions may be one of the first things I do because it's so easy.
All right, cool. Any other topics for the future? I know you've got a whole load of ideas on your wiki, and you put some in the notes here. But what's the
I don't have that much of a detail. Like I'm going to do this step by step. I'm mostly just going to try to work towards the multiple objects in one room thing.
Right.
And I actually have a picture of what that would look like here. Like you could have a state event that say refers to your first label. Just has like, that's your document root. And then that would kind of act as a hint to the algorithm to create a data type for that particular label. We read through it. In this case, I say it's a map CRDT. That stands for conflict-free replicated data type. And I see it has like name, so that'd be the name. In this case, I'm using an example of a study card set again. And you can see it has like a value CRDT over here that says, you know, I may want it to say my flashcard set, but another user may want it to say KB1RD's flashcard set. That's what the green's there. That's a suggestion. And the description say that links out to a rich text CRDT. It's a little difficult to render and draw.io, but what it's supposed to be indicating is that it has text here, and then the JSON is right inside the text, and the editor would process that and show a mention that mentions this awesome study set was created by KB1RD.
Okay.
And then again, another example, flashcards would link out to the array CRDT, which would just have a list of flashcards, and it would show, like, for example, down here, a suggestion to add a flashcard. And then more rich text down here. That's just the same.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Cool. All right, I mean, it sounds like a same plan. It's just a amount of work and and your most poor resource, which is time.
Yeah.
How you're going to figure all that out. All right, Nathan, it's been great. Think we should wrap it up. Good luck with Logotish and Matrix Notepad, and thank you for being on Matrix Live. Bye.
Bye.